I wholeheartedly gave everything just to be able to marry him. Even if he chose to sleep in a separate room from me after marriage, I didn't have a single complaint. Even when he had an ambiguous relationship with his childhood sweetheart, I just pretended not to see it. For the sake of his so-called self-esteem, I took out my money and helped him start a company. For Emily's birthday banquet, he asked me to buy a gift for him and I readily agreed. If you don't show up in front of me within 15 minutes, we'll get divorced. On my way to find him, a truck coming head-on crashed into my car and overturned it. When I opened my eyes again, my cell phone rang and I pressed the answer button. I said decisively into the phone, "Let's get divorced." When I woke up again, I was lying on the bed at home. The sweat on my forehead made me feel like I had just had a nightmare. The phone rang and broke the silence. Andrew's name was on the screen of my cell phone. I answered the phone and pressed the hands-free button. Andrew's familiar voice came out of the phone. "Sophia, today is Emily's birthday banquet. You should send the birthday gift to you at a hotel for me right now. You have 15 minutes to show up, or we'll get divorced." Divorce again. This phone call made me realize that everything I had experienced was not a dream at all. Yes, thank goodness, I was reborn. In my previous life, Andrew's usual trick was to threaten divorce, and I had always compromised and backed down. "Sophia, although you've become my wife legally, don't expect me to touch you even with a finger. If you don't like it, we'll get divorced. You just came from a wealthy family. If you can't accept my attitude, we'll get divorced." What's that expression on your face? Don't think that being rich makes you so great. I didn't marry you for your money. If I could, I would divorce you right now. It turned out that in his heart, I had always been the one who could be abandoned. He knew that I loved him deeply and would do anything to win him over, so how could I bear to divorce him? Andrew's mother was seriously ill and bedridden. He studied during the day and worked at night but still couldn't raise enough money for the hospitalization fees. He had no way out and chose student loans. The debt grew larger and larger. When the creditors found him, he was unable to pay off the debt and was beaten black and blue. They wanted to sell his kidney. A group of them lifted him up and were about to take him away. He begged bitterly and struggled desperately. I rushed forward, blocked their way, and took the initiative to pay off the debt for him. However, Andrew coldly told me that he would definitely pay me back. In his heart, all this was just my way of currying favor with him. I really just wanted to help him, that's all. Not long after that, he came to me. Perhaps because he couldn't pay me back, he talked about a deal with me. He put forward 3 conditions. First, I was to be responsible for all the medical expenses of his mother. Second, I was to support him in starting a business and give him funds so that he could have his own company. Third, after we got married, we would sleep in separate rooms and there would be no real relationship between husband and wife. Because I loved him, I happily agreed to all his requests at that time. Now when I think about it, I was really so love-struck. What unequal treaties these were. Andrew couldn't wait for my answer and said to me a bit angrily, "Sophia, if you dare to let me down at a critical moment, don't blame me for not caring about our relationship as husband and wife. We'll get divorced." Those 2 words again. I cared so much about him. Since he was so eager for a result, I chose to give him what he wanted. "I agree to you." I turned off my phone and threw it on the bed. This was the first time I hung up on him. Andrew's face darkened and he asked gloomily, "Say that again?" What came into my ears next was the busy tone on the other side of the phone. Andrew stood there, looking at his phone in a daze. Before this, I had never hung up on him first, and I had never even refused his requests. He put away his phone. Emily noticed that Andrew was not in the right state and asked with concern, "Andrew, are you okay?" Andrew calmed down and looked at Emily gently. "It's okay. I don't know what's wrong with Sophia. She can't even handle such a small thing as buying a gift for you for me." Emily stepped forward and gave Andrew a big hug. "Andrew, you are the best gift for me." Andrew looked at Emily with a smile on his face and walked into the banquet hall with Emily, completely forgetting about me. He wouldn't believe that I really wanted to divorce him. I sent a WeChat message to my best friend Olivia. "Honey, see you at our usual place. Olivia excitedly called me back. Is your iron tree finally going to bloom? Why don't you go home and be your good wife? After marriage, I canceled all my social activities and cooked at home every day, waiting for Andrew to get off work. I'm not going home today, I said, seeing that I answered so readily. Olivia exclaimed joyfully, see you at our usual place. I'll go there right now. Holding a wine glass in my hand and seeing Olivia swaying in front of me, I suddenly realized that I hadn't stayed out all night for a long time. Andrew didn't like me doing this. After marriage, I could change my preferences for him. Today was bound to be a sleepless night. Olivia and I drank a lot of wine. All the forbearance in my previous life was released at this moment. I wasn't drunk. Instead, I was unusually sober. I knew that only those who had experienced life and death could understand how I felt now. Constantly giving in would only make me lose everything, even my life. I helped the unconscious Olivia out of the bar. Chapter 2. I saw the figures of Andrew and Emily in front of the hotel across the street. He held her in his arms. Emily closed her eyes and Andrew kissed her on the lips. They were kissing on the street like that, and then Andrew took Emily's hand and walked into the hotel. My grip loosened and Olivia almost fell. She opened her bleary eyes and asked me, "What's wrong?" I steadied her again, shook my head, and walked forward. After washing up, I looked at myself in the mirror and most of the drunkenness had gone. I picked up my phone and made a call. Since something had happened, I couldn't just pretend that I hadn't seen it. Help me find out what Andrew did tonight. The next day, Andrew came back and brought Emily with him too. I was having breakfast when they walked straight to the dining table and sat down. Andrew, looking a bit tired, looked at me. Get me a bowl of porridge too. I just stared at him without moving. Seeing that I didn't move, Andrew slapped the table with his palm and shouted, "Are you deaf?" I treated him as if he were air, lowered my head and continued to drink the porridge in my bowl. Andrew got angry and knocked the last bit of porridge in my bowl onto the floor. What do you mean? I got up expressionlessly, turned around and was about to walk out of the dining room. Andrew blocked my way. Sophia? Don't blame me for not showing you any mercy. Hurry up and transfer 1 million to me. I'll let bygones be bygones about this incident. Andrew stuck out his neck and looked at me arrogantly. I said slowly, "Why should I give you money?" "Oh, that reminds me of something." I picked up the phone, dialed a number and put it to my ear. "Secretary Emma, please help me notify that there will be no more payments to Andrew's company from now on." Secretary Emma was obviously stunned when she heard my instruction. Out of professional ethics, she didn't ask the reason and replied, "Okay, President Sophia. I'll handle it right away." Andrew looked at me with a gloomy face. "Sophia, what on earth do you mean?" Emily stepped forward and grabbed my arm. "Sophia, you must be angry that Andrew didn't come home last night, right? It's all my fault. I made him drink too much wine at the birthday banquet. Andrew just accompanied me to celebrate my birthday. Besides, you didn't come yourself. I took care of Andrew for you. Why are you angry with us instead?" I sneered. Indeed, it seemed that everything was my fault. Since it's wrong, it should be corrected in time. There's no way I'll give you money. After saying that, I pushed Emily away and walked out of the house. Behind me, Emily pretended to comfort Andrew but actually indirectly criticized me. As soon as I arrived at the office, Secretary Emma followed me in. "President Sophia, are you really determined to stop funding Andrew's company?" I nodded seriously, "Yes, for sure. Go ahead and handle it." Secretary Emma hesitated for a moment and then reminded me, "But he's your husband." I interrupted Secretary Emma. "I won't have a husband anymore. I'm going to divorce him." Secretary Chen looked at me in shock and was speechless. In my previous life, I kept providing a cash flow for Andrew to ensure the survival of his company. His company had survived until now relying on my money. When I married him, I fulfilled the condition he proposed that I help him start a company. But he didn't have the ability to manage the company at all. Emily offered to help him manage the company and he agreed. But when I offered to help because of Emily's incompetence, Andrew refused me. He said he believed that Emily definitely had the ability to help him manage the company well. He trusted Emily but didn't trust me. Even when the result was right in front of him, he still didn't want to believe it. During that period, I felt so distressed seeing his worried face. Many times he was drunk and sent back by Emily. I really saw it all and felt pain in my heart. I begged him to accept my help and he reluctantly agreed with a straight face. This is your offer to help me. I don't owe you anything. Yes, he never owed me anything. It was all that I offered to him on my own initiative. Chapter 3. Right after I notified to stop the financial assistance, Andrew called. Sophia, is this interesting? How long are you going to keep making a fuss? Hurry up and transfer the money on time, or I'll really divorce you. I played with the pen in my hand and sneered as I listened to Andrew going crazy on the phone. It seemed that Andrew could only use divorce to threaten me. I've already made it very clear to you that I've chosen to divorce you. Besides, didn't you hear me say on the phone this morning that I would stop the funding? Our marriage has made you so tired of it. Divorce is good for both of us. Since we're getting divorced, there's no need for me to invest money in you anymore. For a moment, Andrew's mind went blank. When he came to his senses, he started to be unreasonable again. Are you using a tactic of retreating in order to advance? Don't think I'll fall for it. I'm telling you, I'll give you another 10 minutes. As long as 1 million arrives in the account, I'll forgive you for this nonsense. I didn't want to listen to his following angry shouts, so I hung up the phone and put it on the table. Secretary Emma looked at me awkwardly and couldn't believe it. President Sophia, are you really going to get divorced? Secretary Emma had been with me for many years. He knew better than anyone else, maybe even better than I myself did, how important Andrew was in my heart. The powerful female boss had fallen for Andrew. This couldn't go on like this. I had to stop over-consuming myself. I looked up at Secretary Emma. I knew he was guessing what was on my mind. Don't worry and just handle it. I've made up my mind. Secretary Emma made a gesture of cheering me on and left. I opened the drawer and took out the photos taken by the private investigator from the envelope. The content on them was really disgusting. Andrew didn't stop bombarding me with phone calls. This was the first time he had been so persistent in looking for me. But this kind of persistence was something I didn't need anymore. Seeing that I didn't answer his calls, he began to send me voice messages frantically. I didn't click on them and just watched the unread number on the icon increase. In this life, I won't give him the chance to hurt me again. Before, whenever I called or sent messages to Andrew, he would ignore me unless he needed something from me. Not long after we got married, he asked me to help him set up a company. I worked hard for a whole week for him and finally got the company up and running. I collapsed in the company due to excessive physical exhaustion. Secretary Emma sent me to the hospital. Secretary Emma called him using my phone, but he didn't answer even once. Even in the following few days, he didn't return a single call to me. That time, lying in bed, I had the thought of getting a divorce for the first time. Suddenly, I felt so tired. However, on the day I was discharged from the hospital, he showed up in front of me with a bouquet of flowers in his hands, accompanied by Emily. He walked up to me and just gently ruffled my hair with his hand. And once again, my heart was captured by him and I forgave him for his disappearance. How ridiculous I was back then. Andrew didn't come to see me because he was worried about me. He knew that I had prepared the company for him and he came to claim his company. Before that, I had just transferred 1 million yuan to him to make him financially more comfortable. I had never used money to measure my relationship with him. Looking back now, every time he took the initiative with me, it was because he needed money. How stupid I was. Andrew got really angry when he couldn't find me. Secretary Emma didn't have time to stop him. Andrew and Emily had already rushed into my office. Andrew stepped forward and pushed me angrily onto the chair. What do you mean? You don't answer my calls, you don't reply to my messages. Do you know how worried I was when I couldn't find you? Is it fun for you to throw tantrums like this? Do you know how worried I was? Andrew yelled at me with a dark face. Before, if he had said these things I would surely have been moved to tears. But now every word he said was like a nail stabbing into my heart. I leaned back on the chair, curled my lips and smiled at him. Your way of showing concern for me is really special. Out of what kind of concern are you being so fierce to me? Hearing the sarcasm in my words, Andrew froze on the spot. Emily frowned as she looked at me. Sophia, how can you doubt Andrew's sincerity towards you? Look at how worried Andrew is. It was just a slip of the hand just now. I burst out laughing and stood up. I pushed Emily hard and she fell to the ground. Emily looked at me in disbelief, sitting on the ground in a mess. I shrugged my shoulders and looked at Emily. Do you like this kind of concern? I can show you more concern if you still want it. Emily took a few steps back as she saw me approaching, looking at me warily with fear in her eyes. Andrew helped Emily up from the ground with a pained look and glared at me viciously. Sophia, are you crazy? If you want to hit someone, hit me. Don't take it out on Emily. Andrew gently rubbed Emily's arm with a pained expression. The feeling of nausea in my stomach reminded me that the two people standing in front of me were a cheating couple. Chapter 4. I had just been pushed hard by him, but he didn't care at all and just turned a blind eye. Yet he felt so much pain for Emily and treated her like a precious treasure. Sure enough, no matter how much I loved him, he could only see Emily in his eyes. This is probably the difference between having someone in your heart and not having them. Suddenly, I found it funny and couldn't stop laughing when looking at them. I'm indeed crazy. Now no one can stop me from divorcing you. Hearing my words, Emily immediately became nervous and quickly tried to say nice things. Andrew, I'm not hurt. Don't be angry with Sophia because of me. It's not a big deal. Husband and wife always make up after a quarrel. Don't always mention divorce. Andrew looked at such a sensible Emily with eyes full of affection. He was so touched that he could hardly control himself as she was always thinking of him. But my heart told me that everything in front of me was really ridiculous. Emily was such a green tea bitch and a white lotus. Her tricks were really ruthless. It's not worth getting a divorce for her sake. Andrew, seeing Emily's pitiful look, became even more disgusted with me. Just ignore her. I think she's reached menopause and is biting people like a mad dog here. Andrew looked at me with a dark face. I walked up to them with a big smile on my face. You're right. I was too gentle before and that's why I was bullied and taken advantage of by some people. This is the real me now. I'm capable and wealthy. Why should I keep losing money on you every day? If I donate the money I spend on you to those in need, they would bow to me and say thank you. What have I got now? Is it your scorn or your disgust? Andrew's face gradually turned from blue to purple. He didn't expect that I would speak so bluntly. Andrew's phone rang. Mr. Andrew, please pay off your mother's hospitalization expenses as soon as possible. Okay, I know. He quickly hung up the phone. Andrew held his phone tightly and stared at me with wide eyes. Why didn't you pay the hospitalization expenses? Only then did I realize what he was talking about after he said that. All along, because of my love for him, I took meticulous care of his mother. Out of the 3 requirements I had promised him before, I had never forgotten them for a moment. In this new life, my focus has changed and I did forget about paying for his mother's hospitalization expenses. But now, even if I don't pay it, what right does he have to order me to pay this money? I said slowly, I'm going to divorce you. Then your mother is your own responsibility and has nothing to do with me. From the time we got married until now, I've paid for all your mother's expenses. What have you, as a son, done for her? On what grounds are you blaming me, an outsider? Andrew was furious. You're my wife and her daughter-in-law. I laughed loudly. Not anymore. Don't you still have Emily? She's so capable of helping you make money. What? Can't you even afford your mother's hospitalization expenses? Emily stood there, looking at me in disbelief. Andrew shielded Emily behind him. Why are you always targeting Emily? I'm already very grateful that she can stay in the company to help me. How ridiculous. I had been so devoted to him, yet in the end, I couldn't even compare to Emily. Once we get divorced, you can marry her. Then she'll be responsible for helping you bear all your expenses. Apparently, Andrew was so angry that he snorted coldly and left, pulling Emily along. Want to get divorced? Impossible. I won't agree to the divorce. Looking at Andrew's back, I suddenly saw clearly his ridiculous face. In fact, it was he who had been afraid of getting divorced all along, not me. When I got home in the evening, I found my suitcase thrown at the door. I knew it was Andrew who did it. He had done this before. I had always thought that it was his way of acting coquettishly towards me and indirectly begging for my forgiveness. Did he think that I would give him an excuse to step down and beg for his forgiveness? I was really so stupid that I lost my dignity as a human being for love back then. I was still making excuses for Andrew's cold attitude towards me. That was really typical of being self-abasing. I picked up the phone and put it to my ear. Hello, I want to call the police. Chapter 5. This house is my private property before marriage, and Andrew has no right to drive me out of the house. When the police arrived, I explained my situation. My house has been illegally occupied by someone else. These are my things and now they've been thrown out by him. Andrew would never have dreamed that I would call the police. When the police knocked on the door, he shouted towards the outside of the door from inside the room. Do you know you're wrong? Do you want me to forgive you? Beg me and I'll forgive you. He thought that only I was standing outside the door. The police looked at me with inquiring eyes. I shrugged my shoulders. I proposed divorce to him today. The police knocked on the door again and said to the inside, Mr. Andrew, please open the door. We have something to say to you. What you're doing now is illegal. If you don't open the door, we'll have to break it down by force. Andrew had been leaning against the door complacently, waiting for me to beg for forgiveness. After hearing what the police said, he was obviously startled. He quickly opened the door and when he saw me, he had a big smile on his face. Police officers, my wife and I are just having a normal quarrel between husband and wife. Don't misunderstand. The police looked at me. It depends on what this lady says. Andrew looked at me with a dark face. I said softly, ask him to take my things inside and put them back in their original positions. Then I won't pursue this matter. Hearing my words, Andrew immediately became furious. Sophia, don't push your luck. I pretended to be aggrieved and looked at the police. He's threatening me. Police officers, I'm scared. Otherwise, please follow the normal police dispatch process. The police nodded and walked towards Andrew. Andrew looked at me and quickly took the suitcase into the house. Please come in with me, police officers, and protect me. After saying that, I opened the door wide and invited the police to enter the house together. Andrew opened the suitcase, took out my things one by one from it, and then carefully put them back in their original positions. Andrew must be regretting it bitterly now. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have thrown my things outside the door. In a short while, Andrew had put all my things back in their original positions. I thanked the police very much and saw them out. Then I went back into the house. Andrew slumped down on the bed. Are you happy now? Seeing his expression at this moment and then looking at the empty suitcase, I said, what am I happy about? You did all this willingly. Throwing other people's things around without their consent comes at a price. Don't you understand that? Andrew frowned and stood up, questioning me. Sophia, what's wrong with you? How did you become like this recently? You should have a limit when you're jealous of Emily. She and I are just friends. If you don't want to give me money anymore, then don't. Andrew's attitude obviously weakened. I didn't look at him and turned around to go back to my room. In my memory, this was the first time he begged for my forgiveness. It's a pity that he didn't know that I didn't care about it anymore. The next day, it was Emily who came to see me early in the morning instead of Andrew. Sophia, stop making a fuss. Aren't you afraid that Andrew will really get angry and divorce you? You love Andrew so much. You're just angry with me and jealous that I'm working beside him. I promise you that I'll resign right now and I'll never show up in front of Andrew again. Don't be angry with him anymore. Emily stood in front of me, looking pitiful and begging. I sneered at her. Andrew's tricks were really something. I was just about to speak when Andrew quickly walked over and took Emily into his arms with a gentle look in his eyes. Emily, don't beg her for my sake. If she wants a divorce, then so be it. Having you by my side is enough for me. Andrew glared at me, then gently took Emily's hand and turned to leave. Looking at their backs, I surprisingly felt relaxed. I signed the divorce agreement and asked Secretary Emma to deliver it to Andrew in person. When Andrew got the divorce agreement, Emily was sitting on his office desk and feeding him grapes. She's actually serious about this. Andrew angrily threw the divorce agreement on the table. Emily completely ignored what Andrew said and picked up the divorce agreement to carefully read the part about property division. Andrew, you can't get nothing in the divorce. You can't let Sophia take advantage of you for free. What should belong to you mustn't be taken by her as an advantage. Andrew looked at Emily with an expression that seemed to say, "You understand me." In his eyes, every word Emily said was so right. Andrew, don't sign it yet. Sophia's temper has suddenly changed recently. Maybe she has someone else outside. If we can find out that she cheated during the marriage, it will be all good for you, Emily reminded him. Andrew thought for a moment and nodded, agreeing with Emily's idea. In his heart, I had always obeyed him. Now that I was acting differently, it did seem a bit strange to him. Chapter 6. For a long time, Andrew and Emily secretly followed me. What they didn't know was that I had known about it all along. On this day, I had an appointment with David to have lunch together. I affectionately held his arm. Andrew was so angry that his teeth itched. This damn woman really has someone else outside. No wonder she insisted on divorcing me. Emily took out her phone and took pictures of me and David frantically. With a victorious look on her face, she said, "Now we have evidence in our hands. This time we'll let her know the price of betraying you and make her leave the house with nothing." Thank you, Emily. Fortunately, you're by my side. Otherwise, I would definitely have been kept in the dark and known nothing. Andrew took Emily into his arms. The next day, Emily accompanied Andrew to come to negotiate with me. Emily looked at me and smiled. "You need to change this divorce agreement. We demand that you leave the house with nothing." I smiled at them as if they were a joke. "Are you sure you want to change it to make me leave with nothing?" Andrew stepped forward and raised his hand to hit me. Instead of dodging, I raised my hand to grab Andrew's hand and threw it away forcefully. "What you've done behind my back, don't you know it in your heart? Emily, show her the photos." Emily proudly took the photos out of her bag and threw them in front of me. "We have photos of you having an affair with another man here. What else do you have to say now?" The photos were scattered on the table. I looked at them and laughed. I casually picked up a photo and was just about to speak when David walked in. Andrew looked at David, who was the man whose arm I was holding in the photo. His face turned extremely dark as he pointed at me. "Sophia, you're still my wife. You're so eager to keep this gigolo by your side?" David walked up to Andrew and put his arm around Andrew's shoulders. "Brother-in-law, long time no see." Andrew was completely dumbfounded. He stood there, staring at David in a daze and didn't know what to do. Before he could react, David said, "Brother-in-law, I'm Sophia's cousin. When I held my school entrance banquet, you and my sister came to attend it." After saying that, he patted Andrew's shoulders with an innocent look on his face. Andrew immediately realized that things were not good. I sat on the chair, calmly watching everything in front of me. Andrew didn't care about me at all. How could he remember my relatives? When I married him, he just went through the motions and exchanged greetings with my relatives. My elders loved me very much and had prepared gifts long ago. Andrew had a haughty face and a cold expression until the wedding ended and then left in a hurry. I patiently explained to my elders that he was a person who was cold on the outside but warm on the inside and would definitely be good to me in the future. The lies I told others finally deceived myself. Andrew had never been good to me because he didn't love me and wouldn't remember who my relatives were. Now he definitely wouldn't recognize David. All of this was his own fault. Emily knew she was in the wrong and tried to pull Andrew away. I stopped Andrew. "Don't rush to leave. I also have some interesting things and want to share them with you." I opened the drawer, took out a stack of photos and threw them on the table. Do you want to take a look? I casually picked up one and played with it in my hand. The moment Andrew looked up at the table, his face turned black. Emily quickly collected the photos on the table. The man and woman rolling on the bed in the hotel in the photos were Andrew and Emily. Now shall we sit down and talk about the matter of leaving the house with nothing? I raised my eyebrow and looked at Andrew. Andrew looked at Emily with an ugly expression. He didn't expect that things would develop into this situation. Emily put all the photos into her bag. I sneered, don't bother collecting them. I still have a lot more. Andrew staggered backward and tried hard to steady himself. I looked at the two people in front of me and said coldly, I'm not a heartless person either. Your company will still belong to you, and I'll also leave you the house near the company. Consider it as the affection from our time as husband and wife. For the rest of your lives, I wish you happiness. This time, Andrew looked at me, opened his mouth but couldn't say a word and left with Emily in a mess. David shouted at Andrew's back, former brother-in-law, have a nice trip. Chapter 7. Before long, Andrew's company was on the verge of bankruptcy. Out of desperation, Andrew mortgaged the house I left him. However, Andrew simply didn't know how to manage a company. Coupled with Emily's extravagance, things got worse. Andrew began to seriously manage the company and even tried to persuade Emily to spend less money and secure more contracts instead. Emily played the coquettish card and lied to Andrew that she was pregnant with his child. Andrew happily picked her up and spun her around in excitement. He even excitedly posted a WeChat Moments update. The caption read, "The woman I love is pregnant with our baby." I calmly looked at this Moments post. So these two really got together. Well, that's okay as long as they don't hurt other good people. Unfortunately, the good times didn't last long. Andrew's company was in crisis again. Without my support, Andrew started to beg people everywhere and drink with them. The money from the mortgaged house was just a drop in the bucket for them. Over the years, I had spoiled both of them. Now that there was no one for them to sponge off, their extravagant habits, once formed, couldn't be changed in a short time. They lived a life of debauchery, especially Andrew. Over the years, I had arranged his clothes for him every day. Now was the real test for their so-called love. After that, I ran into Andrew and Emily by chance. At the banquet, Andrew drank glass after glass of wine and humbly said nice things. Under the table, Emily had an affair with that boss on the sly. Andrew downed the wine in his glass in one gulp. I knew that he had seen it too. He clearly saw it but pretended not to. This was the first love he had always cherished in his heart. I stood in the distance, watching all this, and suddenly felt a bit sorry for Andrew. Was this the life he wanted? Halfway through the banquet, Emily blatantly took the boss's arm and left affectionately with him. Andrew slumped over the table. I didn't know if he was really drunk or just pretending. Suddenly, I felt relieved inside. When we got married, Andrew didn't touch me even with a finger because of Emily. Now Andrew was enduring Emily's betrayal like this. Later, Andrew found out that Emily was faking her pregnancy and her attitude towards him was not as good as before. He began to doubt himself, wondering if he was just overthinking things. Finally, one day, the company couldn't hold on any longer and faced bankruptcy. Emily looked at Andrew coldly and said, "Andrew, go back to Sophia and ask her to remarry you. She loves you so much. She will definitely be willing to help you get through this difficult time. You just need to beg her." Andrew looked at Emily in disbelief. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. He suddenly felt that the Emily in front of him didn't seem to be the person he knew. It turned out that the one who truly loved him was never Emily but me. He began to doubt his own choices. "I won't leave you, and I won't go to beg Sophia. I can still live without her." Andrew's little bit of self-esteem made him reluctant to give in. He believed that he could live a good life without me. He was determined to prove it to me. Emily looked at Andrew with an ugly expression and said, "If you don't go to Sophia, we won't even be able to pay for your mother's hospitalization expenses. Don't you care about me? Don't you care about your mother?" Andrew clenched his fists and said, "I'll go earn money right now. I won't let my mother have no money for medical treatment. Emily looked at the stubborn Andrew in front of her and finally couldn't say a word and left angrily. Andrew watched Emily's departing back, and my image popped into his mind. Chapter 8. When I met Andrew again. Emily dragged Andrew and barged into my office. Andrew reluctantly turned around to leave, but Emily grabbed him tightly. Sophia, I'm giving your man back to you. Now I don't owe you anything. Emily pushed Andrew towards me. Suddenly, Andrew stood there like a panicked child. I looked at them and couldn't help but want to laugh. Sorry, I've already divorced him. He has nothing to do with me now. Emily tried to flatter me. Sophia, you've never slept with this man. Aren't you regretful? For 2 million yuan, I'll sell him to you. You can make him do anything for you. Andrew couldn't believe what he heard and looked up at Emily. Emily ignored Andrew and said anxiously, 1 million yuan is okay too. I sneered. She immediately held up 5 fingers and said, 500,000 yuan is okay too. That's the lowest price. I stood up and walked in front of Andrew, then shook my head. Why should I spend money on a man who abandoned me? Seeing that she couldn't persuade me, Emily pushed Andrew and said, hurry up and beg her to give me the money. Andrew clenched his teeth tightly and didn't say a word. I looked at them and walked out of the office. Their affairs had nothing to do with me. They deserved what they got. It was just that I didn't care now. Emily saw my determination to leave and looked at Andrew with disgust. She raised her hand and slapped Andrew hard across the face. Andrew just stood there, allowing Emily to scold and hit him. Are you even a man? You can't even handle a woman. I think any other man is better than you. Andrew looked up at Emily and said, you're the only woman I've ever been with. Emily raised her hand and slapped Andrew across the face again. What's the use of that? Do you think you're some chaste martyr? Every man I've been with is better than you. Andrew was stung by Emily's words and looked at her with a fierce glare. What do you mean? Do you want to hit me? I must have been blind to be with you. Emily left angrily, leaving Andrew standing there in a daze. What Andrew didn't know was that Emily really left, taking away all his remaining possessions. He walked down the street in a wretched state, the evening breeze blowing across his face. Andrew couldn't face the harsh reality that Emily hadn't loved him at all but only his money. But Emily was the person he had cherished deeply in his heart. He had loved her all his life. He couldn't believe it and he didn't want to believe it either. When Andrew arrived at the hospital, Emily was pushing Andrew's mother outwards. I don't have any money left to pay for your medical expenses. Come home with me right away. Andrew's mother, frail and weak, was being pushed forward by Emily. Son, I want to find my son. Andrew stood at the bottom of the stairs and waved to his mother. Mom! Andrew's mother slipped and tumbled all the way down the stairs. Andrew watched as his mother lay in front of him and took her last breath with blood all around her. He knelt on the ground and took his mother into his arms, grief-stricken. His mother was gone. Andrew held his mother and cried like a child. He knew that it was Emily who had caused his mother's death. He looked up at Emily on the stairs. She was actually looking at all this coldly, with no expression on her face. Andrew gently put his mother down and walked up the stairs. You don't need to thank me. I've saved you a considerable amount of money. Andrew grabbed Emily and pushed her hard. Emily was pushed down the stairs. Emily tried to grab Andrew but missed. She tumbled all the way down the stairs, fell to the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. Andrew laughed wildly and said, murderers must pay with their lives. Help! Murder! The doctors around shouted. He slumped to the ground, staring blankly at where Emily's body lay, unable to hear any sound. Andrew was sent to prison. I went to visit him in prison. He had his hair shaved and sat opposite me. He looked haggard, as if he had aged 10 years all of a sudden. Andrew looked up at me and said, you win. I didn't know what to say. I stood up and left. Walking out of the prison, I looked up at the blue sky. I knew that between Andrew and me, I had won. Andrew never knew from start to finish. I deliberately got in touch with David to make them think that I was having an affair. When we got divorced, I didn't make him leave the house with nothing because I wanted to leave some benefits for Emily. Otherwise, how would Emily marry Andrew and live a hard life? I privately intercepted all the clients who wanted to partner with Andrew, which led to the bankruptcy of his company. I watched as he and Emily fell out and broke up because of money. I'm sorry about Auntie's death. I didn't expect that Emily would involve Auntie. But I've never regretted getting to this point. In this new life, this is the price they should pay. I came to see him today to ask him that question, did you ever love me? But now this answer is no longer important to me. Only when you love yourself will you be loved. In the days to come, I will meet the one who loves me again.